So this is your video on continuous domain and range for 1017. This is the Friday after we missed class because of the PSAT. Alright, so we learned about doing domain and range using discrete last class period, and that was where we had dots. And our domain and range, when we just had dots, look like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. They were just a series of numbers: -6, -5, 2, +5, something like that. But when we do continuous data, because it's not individual points, continuous is a connected line or a curve, we have to use a range of numbers. And by range of numbers I mean like from 5 to 10, or from -2 to -1. So we have to use a range of numbers instead of individual numbers. To show that we're going to use a range of numbers, we're going to use inequality symbols and something called interval notation. We're going to learn those two methods here in this video today. We're going to tell you in class a story about Dollar the robot, so I'm not going to ruin that story for you now, but the main thing you need to understand is that domain is still X, and it goes from left to right, and range is still Y, and it goes from bottom to top. Domain goes from left to right because domain is the x-axis, and the x-axis goes from left to right. Range goes from bottom to top because it's the y-axis, and it goes up and down. Okay. Alright, so to help us remember some of the things that we're going to need today, I'm going to show you a couple of faces here, and we'll show you these in class as well. If we use greater than or less than symbols, we use an open dot, just like we were doing with our inequalities. And then later in the year we'll learn something else where we use a dashed line like this. This guy also has parentheses for ears. Okay? So this is one of our faces of inequality that we have to get used to using. The other one looks like this. If we have the equal to part, we learned in class a couple of days ago on inequalities that we have to color that in. He's going to have a solid mouth when we learn about that later in the year, and he will have brackets for ears. And so this is the second inequality face, and we're going to give you a picture of these to help you remember those in class, but these are the things you need to be able to remember for today's lesson. Alright, so we're going to get right into it. Red is still going to be domain. Okay. Blue is going to be range, just like the other day. So domain and range. Alright, so when we do these, we like to set up, like I said, a range of numbers of how far across the graph goes. So domain is left to right, so we're going to start where the graph starts on the left. So we go all the way over here. This is the left, this is the right. And so right here is the furthest that it goes. And so that crosses that number right there, which is -3. Then we go all the way to the right where the graph ends, which is right here, and that +3. Domain is X, so we put an X in the middle. When we're setting these up where we have the X in the middle, these always start out as less than symbols, and then we check the dots to see. Okay? Remember, our faces look like this: open circle, dot, 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 parenthesis ears. Lines under, he has a closed nose, mouth, bracket ears. Okay? So when we look at the number -3, I see an open circle. Open circle is that symbol, so we leave that one alone. Over here I see a colored end on, so that tells me to use that underneath it. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing with our range, except range is from bottom to top. So we're going to start at the bottom, so I start going up. Right here is where the lowest part of the graph is, and that's -3. Then I keep going. The highest part of the graph is right there. That's where that line is, and that's +3. Because it's range, range is Y, we put a Y in the middle. When it's in the middle, we always start out with less thans. The bottom one was colored in, so we have to use the line underneath it. The top one is not colored in, so we leave that one like that. Alright, so now we're going to do this same thing using interval notation. Interval notation is where we bring in the parentheses. So when we see a less than symbol like this, we use a parenthesis. and we see in less than or equal to, we use a bracket, just like bracket guy shows us over here in the faces. And then we just take the numbers, -3, comma, 3. And so what this says is the domain goes from -3 to +3. It's an open circle at -3, closed circle at regular 3. Alright, the range, we're going to represent it here. We start in the same place down here. This has a colored in, this has a line under it, so we start with a bracket. This does not, so we go parenthesis, always going to be a comma in the middle. This started at -3 and goes to +3. So interval notation is actually an easier way of doing it. It's just this has not been on star yet. We never know whether it's going to be, but to this date it hasn't been on star. So our focus a lot of times will be on inequality notation, but we want to show it to you because you will have to learn this for Algebra 2. All right, let's take a look at the next. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from left to right. There's left, -3. There's right, 6. X in the middle, start with less thans. Colored in, gets a line under it. No colored in, no line under it. Let's go ahead and go down and do our notation down here. Line under it means bracket. No line under it means parenthesis. We always have a comma. Starts at -3 and goes to 6. Okay, let's switch to this bottom to top. This is how low the graph goes, -8. This is how high the graph goes, +6. Always y's in the middle. Start with less thans. Look at -8, open circle, so we leave it alone. Look at 6, closed circle. Draw our line under it. Less than symbol gets a parenthesis. Less than or equal to gets a bracket. Always a comma. This goes from -8 to +6. Alright, so what you should notice on this one is it's a little bit different in that it has these arrows on it. Okay? And anytime we see arrows, that indicates that it goes forever. And so that means that we're going to bring in this idea of infinity. It goes forever in a certain direction. Other than that, everything's going to be the same when we're doing this. So we're going to do domain, so we're going to go left to right. So this graph starts right here at -2. This graph has arrows on the end of it, and so it goes all the way to positive infinity. Start with x in the middle. Start with less thans. Now we don't have any dots anymore, and so this colored in is the same as touching the line. So does the black line touch the red line? And the answer is yes. So that gets equal to. Infinity, we can never get to infinity because there's always one more number, so it stays less than. Okay, our interval notation, when it has a line under it, we do bracket. Can't get to infinity, so we do it that way. -2, comma, infinity. Now, to this point on the STAR test, they've also not used the infinity symbol, so we're going to teach you how to rewrite this in another way. So if we don't use the infinity symbol, then it would just say -2 is less than or equal to x. But we can't have x on the right-hand side because just like Beyonce said, we want to move to the x to the left. So if we move the x to the left and the -2 to the right, if we flip those, then we have to flip the symbol. And so this is the actual answer that you would see on the STAR test. X is greater than -2. Right? Now we're going to do bottom to top. This arrow indicates that it also goes forever down, which would be negative infinity. And it indicates that it goes forever up, which would be positive infinity. So that's negative infinity to positive infinity, y in the middle. Can't get to either one of those, so you have to use less thans. Parentheses on both sides, negative infinity to positive infinity. Just like I said a minute ago, they've never used the infinity symbol on the test. So if you have one that goes forever in both directions, this is considered all real numbers. That means every number is a solution. So all real numbers. So a couple of different things on this one to get used to, but we'll do enough of these to where you're comfortable with it. Again, I see some arrows, so I know some infinity stuff is going to happen. I always start with left to right. This arrow indicates that this goes forever that way, which is negative infinity, forever that way, which is positive infinity. So negative infinity to positive infinity, x, start with less thans. You can't get to infinity, so we leave them less thans. Parenthesis, parenthesis, comma, negative infinity, negative infinity. Remember, this symbol gets parentheses. Just like a second ago, I told you that if it goes forever in both directions, it's really called all real numbers. And these are the exact words that have been used on the test for the last 3 years. Anytime it goes forever in both directions, we say all real numbers. All numbers are covered. Range is going to go from bottom to top. Again, these arrows are also going down, so they go down to negative infinity. But it doesn't go up to positive infinity. It stops right there, which is the number 4. So it goes from negative infinity to 4. Y in the middle, always less than. That one stays less than because you can't get to negative infinity. But the 4, see how the line actually touches that blue line? So it is equal to, parenthesis for the less than, bracket for the less than or equal to, negative infinity to 4, comma in the middle. Okay. This one we also have to look at it a different way because remember I told you we won't have the infinity symbol. So if we get rid of the infinity part, we have y is less than or equal to 4, and this one does not need to be flipped because the variable is on the left like Beyonce wanted. And that's it.